Imagine a queen so powerful she once defied empires, yet so cursed by bloodline that her final fate would not be death at the hands of her enemies, but violation by the very son she brought into the world. This is the chilling, disturbing end of Berenice II of Egypt. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you are watching from, smash that like button, share this with friends and family, and don't forget to subscribe to Historian Bunker. Hit that notification bell so you never miss these twisted and hidden histories again. Berenice II was born into a world of violence, ambition, and betrayal. Her father, Megas of Cyrene, carved a small but glittering kingdom from the deserts of North Africa. Yet even in her earliest years, her life was poisoned by politics. Cyrene was not a land of peace. It was a jewel of Hellenistic Africa, fought over by Egypt, Greece, and local tribes. Megas secured it with iron and cunning, but from the moment Berenice was born, she became less a daughter and more a pawn. Her mother, Ptolemy II, was no gentle figure. She was the daughter of Seleucid royalty, trained in survival, raised in courts where poison was as common as perfume. Ptolemy's ambition for her daughter was boundless, but love was scarce. From childhood, Berenice understood that survival meant calculation. She saw servants vanish for speaking too much, generals executed for hesitating in battle, and women dismissed as bargaining chips. She vowed she would not be dismissed, but fate had no interest in vows. When Megas died, Cyrene became a prize for the Ptolemies of Egypt. And standing at the center of this storm was Berenice, barely a teenager, suddenly the most desirable bride in the Eastern Mediterranean. Suitors came like vultures. Greek nobles whispered their intentions, Egyptian envoys pressed their demands, and her mother Ptolemy maneuvered like a spider. For Berenice, adolescence was not about girlish dreams, but about alliances sealed with flesh. She was promised to Ptolemy III of Egypt, heir to the most powerful kingdom in the Hellenistic world. But promises in royal courts were fragile things. Ptolemy plotted for her own power, and Cyrene's generals muttered rebellion. Berenice, still little more than a girl, found herself in the center of schemes that could topple kingdoms. And this was only the beginning. Her story would not be one of safety, but of blood. Even as negotiations swirled, whispers reached her ears. Her mother's ambition, her stepbrother's plots, and her own uncertain body being readied not for her own desires, but for dynastic survival. Every kiss, every touch, would be political. The girl who should have been shielded by royal walls was instead paraded as a bargaining chip. And in this role, Berenice learned the first lesson of queenship in her age. Her womb was more valuable than her words. Yet even then, she showed flashes of steel. Chronicles say she rejected one suitor with scorn, declaring she would never bow to a man unworthy of her father's legacy. But pride was dangerous. Pride made enemies. Her marriage to Ptolemy III was supposed to cement peace. Instead, it became the fuse that lit wars across two kingdoms. And for Berenice, it marked the transition from pawn to queen, but a queen cursed from the very start. When Berenice II arrived in Alexandria, the city was unlike anything she had ever seen. Marble palaces gleamed under the Mediterranean sun, and the library towered as the jewel of human knowledge. She was no longer a pawn. She was queen of Egypt. But Egypt was not a land of stability. The Nile fed millions, but it also bred rebellion. The Ptolemies ruled with gold and blood, their dynastic marriages tangled with incest, their legitimacy always questioned. And now Berenice stood at the heart of it. Her marriage to Ptolemy III was not one of love. It was a political bond sealed in ritual, yet the chronicles describe a surprising partnership. He valued her sharp mind, her ability to command loyalty, and her ferocity when enemies threatened. Legends whisper of Berenice racing horses through Alexandria's streets, her hair flying, her rivals fuming at her scandalous defiance of royal decorum. She was no cloistered queen. She was visible, dangerous, and adored. But with admiration came resentment. Ptolemaic queens were expected to be ornamental, silent, and obedient. Berenice was none of these. She spent treasure on her own allies, maneuvered generals, and dared to overshadow even her husband. When Ptolemy III left Egypt to wage war in Syria, it was Berenice who ruled as regent. The city feared famine, soldiers rioted, and the court schemed. Yet she held power with an iron grip, proving she was more than a queen by name. During this time, she became infamous for one of history's most chilling acts, ordering the execution of her own mother, Apama II. Chronicles describe it not as grief, but as necessity. A queen cannot afford rivals, even if they share her blood. This act stained her reign forever. Killing a parent was unthinkable, but Berenice framed it as survival. Her mother had plotted with rebels against her marriage to Ptolemy. To rule Egypt, Berenice chose the crown over kinship. The people whispered of her cruelty, yet others admired her resolve. A queen who killed her own mother was a queen to be feared, and in Egypt, fear was power. Berenice's legend only grew darker. When a rival general questioned her authority, she summoned him to the palace. Instead of negotiation, she ordered his public execution, declaring that no man could question her reign. The streets ran with blood, but Alexandria cheered. They had seen queens dismissed as playthings. Now, they saw a woman ruling with the ferocity of a pharaoh. Berenice II was no mere wife. She was a sovereign drenched in terror and strength. Her marriage with Ptolemy was marked by bloodshed, but also by survival. The two forged an empire through cruelty. Together, they expanded Egyptian influence, crushed rivals, and enriched Alexandria with the spoils of war. But behind the golden masks of power, cracks deepened. The Ptolemies had long embraced incest to preserve their bloodline. Cousins married cousins, brothers married sisters. And Berenice's children were born into this web of genetic doom. Her most famous act of devotion came not with blood, but with sacrifice. When Ptolemy went to war, she cut her hair and placed it in the temple as an offering to the gods for his safe return. The gods, or fate, answered. He returned victorious. Her lock of hair vanished from the temple, sparking rumors of divine intervention. Astronomers claimed the gods placed it among the stars, naming a constellation for her sacrifice, Coma Berenices. A queen's hair turned eternal light, but no starlight could wash away the blood. Her reign was already cursed with the shadow of incest, betrayal, and revenge. And soon, the enemy she could never have imagined would come not from foreign lands, but from her own bloodline. Her son, Ptolemy IV Philopator, was born into luxury, yet shaped by decay. The blood of gods, they claimed, ran through him. But in truth, it was a poisoned inheritance of incest, indulgence, and madness. From childhood, whispers followed him. Too soft, too decadent, too cruel. He was said to drown kittens for sport, mock priests during sacred rituals, and indulge in wine-soaked debauchery while others starved. Berenice II, who had murdered her own mother to secure her throne, now faced a son who reflected not strength, but corruption. Where she had been ruthless, he was reckless. Where she was feared, he was mocked. The court indulged him. Advisors fawned, mistresses whispered, sycophants fed his every appetite. But beneath the velvet and perfumes lay something darker. A boy who saw power not as duty, but as pleasure. As he grew, Egypt crumbled. Armies went unpaid, temples decayed, and rivals plotted. Yet Ptolemy IV cared little. His obsessions were flesh and spectacle. His palace became a theater of lust and cruelty. Some claimed his debauchery was madness born of inbreeding. Generations of sibling marriages had weakened the dynasty. Others saw it as choice, a man raised to believe the world existed only to feed his desire. Berenice II, once adored for her defiance, became an aging queen. Her beauty faded, but her power endured. Yet to her son, she was not mother nor mentor. She was a rival, an obstacle, a possession to be claimed or destroyed. The tension boiled in whispers before it erupted in horror. The court chroniclers, terrified to write too openly, hinted at rumors that shocked even a city used to incestuous kings and queens. It is said Ptolemy IV, in a drunken haze of arrogance and lust, forced himself upon his own mother, Berenice II. The act was not merely a crime of flesh. It was humiliation, domination, and ultimate betrayal. For a dynasty that built itself on incestuous unions, even this was monstrous. Brother and sister had been wed for centuries, but a son defiling his mother shattered every taboo, even in Egypt. Some say Berenice fought back, screaming in fury. Others claim she submitted, broken by fear and isolation. But all sources agree. The act marked the end of her reign, her dignity, and her hope. The queen who had ruled armies, executed generals, and defied empires was now reduced to prey in her own palace. Not by enemies from abroad, but by the son she had raised to inherit her crown. Afterward, Ptolemy IV mocked her. He paraded his power, reminding courtiers that if he could violate his own mother, none could resist him. It was not sex. It was conquest, a performance of terror. The palace reeled. Advisors debated in whispers. Priests trembled at the sacrilege, but none dared act. To oppose Ptolemy IV was to invite execution, torture, or worse. Silence became survival. Berenice, once called the Star Queen whose hair adorned the heavens, now became a shadow. Broken, disgraced, yet still alive. A woman who had lost everything but breath. Her enemies smelled weakness. Courtiers who once feared her now circled, eager to profit from her downfall. Even her loyalists abandoned her, unwilling to risk the wrath of her monstrous son. The queen who had executed her mother to secure the throne was now undone by her own child. History offers few fates more cruel or more ironic. After the unspeakable act, Berenice II became a ghost in her own palace. The marble corridors that once echoed her commands now swallowed her silence. She had ruled armies, and now she could not command her own son. Ptolemy IV reveled in her humiliation. He flaunted his power with drunken banquets, taunting her presence, mocking her aging body before courtiers who dared not look her in the eye. Egypt's queen had become its spectacle. In whispers, priests condemned him as cursed. To defile one's mother was not only immoral, it was an insult to the gods. The Nile itself seemed to rebel. Its floods faltered, famine spread, and omens darkened the sky. But Ptolemy laughed. He declared himself favored by Dionysus, the god of wine and ecstasy. He built shrines to indulgence, replacing discipline with decadence. Egypt bled, while its king drowned in pleasure. Berenice II, broken though she was, still inspired loyalty. Old generals who remembered her reign muttered of restoring her, of striking down the son who had shamed both her and the throne. But spies carried every whisper back to Ptolemy IV. And like his mother before him, he understood the lesson of survival in the Ptolemaic court. Strike first and strike mercilessly. The order came swiftly. One night, Berenice was seized by guards, dragged from her chambers, her cries swallowed by torchlit halls. The queen who had been Egypt's jewel was now a prisoner in the palace she had once ruled. Some sources claim she was strangled in silence. Her life ended quickly to avoid unrest. Others describe a slower, more grotesque fate. Poison forced down her throat, or starvation in a sealed chamber. What all accounts agree on is this: Berenice II did not die as a queen, but as a discarded relic. Her body was hidden, her name smeared, her memory tainted by whispers of incest and shame. The woman once immortalized in the heavens as Coma Berenices, her hair shining as a constellation, was erased from mortal memory. Her son, the monster, ensured that even the stars seemed mocking. For Ptolemy IV, it was a triumph. He had destroyed not only his rivals, but the very woman who had given him life. For Egypt, it was the beginning of decay from which the dynasty would never truly recover. The people mourned in silence. A queen who had defied kings, killed her own mother, and ruled in blood had been undone by a fate no sword could deliver. Her tragedy was not merely death, it was betrayal by blood. Her downfall became a warning whispered through centuries. In the Ptolemaic dynasty, the greatest threat to your life was not your enemies abroad, but the children you bore at home. And with her death, the curtain began to fall on Egypt's Hellenistic glory. A throne built on incest, betrayal, and blood would crumble, leaving only ruins and haunting stories. When Berenice II's body was hidden away, her death was not the end. It was the beginning of a slow unraveling that would poison the very dynasty she had sacrificed everything to protect. Her son, Ptolemy IV, wore the crown but not the respect of his people. They remembered her as a queen of iron will, even with blood on her hands, while he was seen as a drunken shadow, unworthy of the gods. The Nile itself seemed to curse him. Failed floods brought famine, plagues swept the countryside, and rebellions erupted. Priests muttered that the gods punished Egypt for the king's unholy violation of his mother. Foreign powers sensed weakness. The Seleucids struck at Egypt's borders, and Ptolemy's armies, once commanded by generals loyal to Berenice, faltered. Egypt survived by luck, bribes, and betrayal, not by strength. And within the palace, rot deepened. Ptolemy filled it with sycophants, poets of decadence, and lovers who flattered his ego. True statesmen vanished, either executed or exiled. Governance gave way to indulgence. The people whispered that Berenice's ghost haunted the palace. Some swore her constellation burned brighter in the sky, a sign that even in death, she condemned her son's corruption. Generations later, poets still wrote of her. A queen who cut her hair for love, whose star shines eternal, but who met an end too vile to be recorded openly. She became both myth and cautionary tale. The Ptolemies never escaped her shadow. The dynasty staggered on for another century, each ruler weaker, each marriage more entangled in incest, until Cleopatra VII, the last queen, fell to Rome. Berenice's fate became a symbol of dynastic poison. Power preserved by incest would ultimately destroy itself, turning family into enemies and mothers into prey for their own sons. Her story also reveals the darker truth of monarchy, that thrones built on blood demand more blood, until nothing remains but ghosts and ruins. She was both victim and perpetrator, both tyrant and tragedy. Modern historians debate the details. Was the violation fact, rumor, or propaganda? The ancient sources hint, but rarely state directly, fearful of writing such sacrilege. Yet the silence itself screams. What cannot be written often tells the deepest truths, and whether whispered by priests, hinted by chroniclers, or carved into the myths of her constellation, one thing endures. Berenice's end was one of horror. And in that horror lies her legacy. A queen who rose through blood, ruled with terror, and fell not to her enemies but to her son's monstrous desire. Her story is not just history, it is warning. So the next time you look up at the constellation Coma Berenices, remember it is not just a patch of stars. It is the hair of a queen who lived for power, died in disgrace, and left behind one of the most disturbing legacies in the history of queens.